Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you are watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be taking a look at the Old Dominion Monarchs, who finished 6-7 last season and capped off their season with an appearance in the famous Toastery Bowl. They wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring showcase on April 13th. We have two special guests joining us today. They started out as a group of friends tailgating together, and it has grown into the best source for information on Old Dominion athletics. From podcasts to articles to athletes, NIL merchandise, they have you covered. They are for fans and by the fans. They are the ODU Monarchists. Joining us today from the Monarchists are Mike Langston and David Asbury. The ODU Monarchists can be found on X at ODU Monarchists. Welcome to the show, Mike and David.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
All right, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. And Mike's probably tired of hearing me ask this question, because I think he's probably heard me ask it 2 or 3 times. But last season, the Monarchs played a 3-3-5 defense, and they seemed to really struggle to generate pressure. Will they be sticking with the 3-3-5 this season? And if so, how do you think they plan on getting more pressure on opposing quarterbacks?
I'll let you go, David. I'm gonna.
Oh, you throw the hard question to me.
Well, technically, isn't it more of a 3-2-5 or a 3-2-6? Because we're only using two linebackers, and sometimes we use 3. But for most, I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of times you're right. I don't think the defensive scheme will change a whole lot from last year. I actually think the defensive scheme up front 7 look really good. When you have a 3-3, you can always blitz a linebacker, and it kind of disguises the blitz more than a 4-2 would. But you're not wrong. We need more pressure on the quarterback. We were last in the Sun Belt last year when it came to sacks. We were last in the Sun Belt on offense when it came to sacks, and we were last in the Sun Belt on defense when it came to sacks. We need more pressure up front. We do have a lot of returners up front. Denzel Lowry, who is another one of Ricky Ronnie's first recruiting classes, is going to be up front on the defensive line. Amari Morrison as well is a veteran that should be generating more pressure than he has. We're going to blitz linebackers. I think, and Mike may correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our leading sack, the guy who had the most sacks last year, was Jason Henderson. We need more sacks from other people. And so Jason Henderson's freed up to do other things. Will Blake Seiler and the defensive coordinator, the defense, change it up to generate more sacks? Maybe. We'll have to see if he's confident in the guys in the front to get more sacks and more pressure as is before he probably decides if he wants to change it up or not. And right now, we just don't know. Fall camp, a lot of things can happen in fall camp.
So a couple things about the defensive formation we're doing is we're keeping those 3 linebackers in, because if you look at our roster the last 2 years, you wanted Wayne Matthews, Jason Henderson, EJ Green in on every play because they were 3 of our best players. You still have 2 of those guys back this year, so you still want 2 of those guys on the field at all times. And then you got to talk about the secondary. The last 2 years, we've replaced almost everybody in the secondary 2 years in a row. So do you want him pulling a body out of that secondary and putting it on the defensive line in a group that's brand new for the second straight year? Or would you rather have an extra body in the secondary because you don't trust that group? And I think that's something to consider, and maybe might explain why we've only been running this 3-3 formation. Is how much do you trust the secondary in a pass-heavy league? That's really what it boils down to, and I'm not sure the trust is really there yet.
Yeah, for me, I would say it's almost a double-edged sword. Pick your poison, right? Because you can have 6 Deion Sanders back there, and if you're not getting pressure on the quarterback, at some point, coverage is going to break down. It's just going to happen, right? So I don't know. I definitely agree. I mean, it's pick your poison. You want to have better coverage, or you want to get more pressure. And I don't know. Hopefully, we can find a more happy medium, I guess, this year, right?
Yeah, I will shout out Chris Trinidad. We interviewed him a few weeks ago. They obviously think he's going to make some big improvements this year and be more impactful. If him, Amori, Jalen McClain, DeAndre Lynch, Chris Spencer, Cole Daniels, Denzel Lowry, if they can all be more aggressive and effective in their pass rush, I mean, it's what we need to happen to see a change. But this defense, the way it's set up, allows us to stay in games. There's a reason why we're in so many one-score games, and it's because this defense bends but doesn't break that often. Um, it obviously broke in a few games in that second half, but if the passing game was more effective, what's the score at that point?
Yeah, that's not all on the defense, right? The
Yeah.
offense going 3-and-outs doesn't help the situation.
Right. I mean, they were on the field more than any defense in the country last year, other than maybe Tennessee's. They're going to break at some point if the offense isn't more effective. So I don't know. I like the defense to set up. It is what it is. It's their best option, I think, for with the talent they have, and to give us chances to win. It's maybe not the best marriage of offense and defense, a quick hitting offense and a defense that bends and doesn't get off the field that often. It might not be the best marriage, but the defense wasn't the problem last year.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sure we'll talk about the secondary and the changeup there, but it was a bend and don't break defense. It didn't allow a lot of big plays. It may let you catch the 5-yard catch. It may let you get the big run, but or a mediocre run, but you're not getting huge touchdowns on this defense. And I agree with Mike that it is the biggest issue with the team last year is probably being more consistent with the passing game on offense and not the defense that actually played pretty dang good on all three levels, except sacks and generating pressure. That was the biggest weakness of the defense last season.
The second best. I guess if we're going to mention weaknesses, the second weakness is running quarterbacks and containing them in the pocket.
Yeah. Running quarterbacks played well against this defense, unfortunately.
Yeah. It was that Coastal game is just bringing me nightmares back. That was brutal to watch.
Ethan, go ahead.
Oh, you go.
I was going to say Ethan Vascow from Coastal Carolina was committed to ODU, and he flipped his commitment to Kansas and then eventually transferred to Coastal Carolina, and he's from Chesapeake, Virginia. He's from where you and I are from. He played at Oscar Smith. I used to play against Oscar Smith, so I'm very upset that he's now and was supposed to be one of our players, and now he plays for a rival. And he ran a lot on our ODU defense last season. And I don't mean any ill will towards him. You got to do what's best for you. But man, you're going to be a villain to me on the field.
Well, Mike, you kind of covered the defensive line for us, or started to anyway. It seemed like to me last year, Amori Morrison was the standout in terms of being able to get pressure. So who do you feel like needs to step up and help Amori this year for that D line to be successful?
Well, I think they're putting a lot on Chris Trinidad and Denzel Lowry to both be the kind of breakout players on D line this year. They have the talent to do it. It's going to be really interesting. One thing we interviewed Santana Saunders, and he brought up this one thing that he said was brand new for the team this year. They're doing self-scouting, so they'll have a breakout session during practice where they can talk to each other, the offensive line, defensive line, and talk to each other about what they're doing wrong or what they're seeing that makes things work. So the communication between the O-line and D-line, that's huge. But it's also, they're teaching each other what to look out for and what they're doing. Like, I think we could see a big jump in both cases. Self-scouting is not a new thing, but it's a new thing in Old Dominion, and I think it's awesome to hear that they're finally doing it. We've heard issues with some players. They don't like to be told from coaches what they're doing wrong. But if their buddies are telling them what they're doing wrong and they're getting exposed in practice for it, I think that's a great learning opportunity for all of these guys. And I'm excited to see the impact that has this season.
Yeah. When you talk about breakout players in the defensive line, and you mentioned Amari Morrison, I want Amari Morrison to do more. Like, we've been waiting for him to be the star on the defensive line, and he wasn't bad last year. I'm not gonna talk bad about his play last year at all, but it was far from star level. I want to see more from him. I want to see him generate some more sacks, because I know he's capable of doing it. He can do it. We just haven't seen it yet.
All right. Moving over to the linebackers, we lose our second leading tackler, Wayne Matthews III. He's off to Michigan State. But standout freshman Mario Thompson returns. Obviously, we're super excited to get our All-American and leading tackler from the last 2 years, Jason Henderson, back. And then they also return, like Mike mentioned, E.J. Green returns from injury. How did the linebackers look in the spring, and did anyone stand out to you guys?
I mean, in the spring, you didn't have Jason playing. So I like this group. Koa Natola came in last year and really played well in substitution for Jason when he went down with his injury. EJ Green is talented and loves hitting people and making his impact felt. And then Jason, I mean, two-time All-American, maybe the best player who's ever played here. I mean, he's pushing up for that to compete with Taylor with the accolades. And I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to enjoy this last season of Jason because it's going to be special. People keep asking how he's feeling and all that. How is it he recovering from his injuries? This is a guy you don't want to doubt anything, what he can overcome, because his work ethic and his mentality is just so hyper-focused to be the best he can be that I don't know. We're lucky to have him.
We are very lucky to have Jason Henderson, and it's almost like an afterthought now because we're so used to having Jason Henderson being one of the best linebackers, not in the Sun Belt, but in all of college football. He was the only Sun Belt player to be ranked the top 100 in the new college football 25 game. The only one. He's the only All-American that I remember ODU ever having, if we've ever had another first-team All-American. He is on track to break the NCAA tackles record this year. He needs like 153, and don't cite me on that number. I might be off a little bit, but he needs over 150 to break it, which is a lot of tackles. But it's not a lot of tackles for Jason Henderson. He's done that twice. So he did not play in the spring. He needs to fully recover. But if he has a season like he had last year or a season like he had the year before, he's probably going to the NFL next year. And we are very lucky to have him back for his senior year. He's another guy who has played all 4 of his college years here at ODU. And Blake Seiler, I believe, was the one who recruited him. And he's a great player for us. But also looking at the rest of the linebacker room, we got a pretty stacked linebacker room. Mike mentioned Koa Natala. He has hair that Troy Polamalu, and frankly, his play reminds me of Troy Polamalu. It looks like Troy Polamalu is playing for ODU whenever he's on the field. He plays really well. He's one of those great stories of a guy who starts on special teams and works his way up to back up Jason Henderson and get his playing time and make the most of his playing time. So I'm excited to see Koa play in the future. You mentioned Mario Thompson. Mario Thompson was a true freshman last year. He's going to be a true sophomore this year. He filled in once EJ Green got hurt. And he filled in pretty nicely, getting over 40 tackles. And on the other side, we'll probably have EJ Green back, who got hurt early in his senior year. So he got a medical red shirt, and he's going to be on the field, and as Mike said, he loves to hit people. So if we play a 3-3, and those are our 3 guys, Mario Thompson, Jason Henderson, and EJ Green, we got a pretty stacked linebacker unit. And we were a top 5 Sun Belt against the run team. and we were able to stuff some very big Sunbelt names. Rasheen Ali scored on us, but he didn't get a whole lot of yards on us. Marcus Carroll. We were able to stuff the run pretty well last year, and I expect that to continue with this unit, especially if Jason Henderson comes back to form.
I want to note something, though. Losing Wayne Matthews,
Right.
people might not appreciate how big of a loss that is. One thing we learned was he was obviously Jason's the captain. He's calling the plays. But EJ was able to do that as well. And he was able to call out switches, call out blocks and all that. He was a really good communicator and a second kind of middle linebacker on the field. And I know there's concern there for replacing a guy like that because you had basically two Jasons on the field at all times. Someone that can put his teammates in the right position. That's something that you just can't replace easily. And I'm kind of concerned about that a little bit, but I do love this linebacker room.
You guys touched on Henderson's recovery from injury, but what about EJ Green? Have you heard anything about his recovery? Is he on track to be ready for fall camp?
Yeah, he's on track. No issues there. I haven't even heard issues with Jason. At one point, they were like, he might not be ready till October, and now they're like, he's probably going to play week 1. So setbacks can happen, but right now everything looks pretty good.
Yeah, just
knee
injuries
early in the season. I was just saying Green was hurt early in the season, so he's probably going to be back, but we'll have to see for sure.
Yeah, to your point, Mike, on Henderson, his was a little bit later in the year, and I just did an interview with Devin Vosen, wide receiver from South Alabama, had a knee injury, I think, in week 2, and he was telling me he literally just got cleared for contact like last week. So yeah, I can see where maybe Henderson might be cutting it close for the beginning of the year, or right there at the end of fall camp. Let's move over to the defensive backfield. You guys have referenced it a couple times. They've lost a ton of over there, both to graduation and the transfer portal. I think it was 7 total guys that are gone, and so the room is relatively young. They bring in a lot of guys in the portal. Cornerback, who David mentioned in this earlier about the spring game, Rashid Reason, really being the only returner from last year that logged over 200 snaps for that defensive backfield. Can you tell us what we should expect from them in 2024, and who do you think will need to step up for them?
You go first, David.
All right, so at cornerback, you probably have Rashid Reason, who has been at ODU for a while, and Angelo Rankin, who just transferred in from Richmond. Keandre will also probably step in at cornerback as well. At safety, we'll probably have Will Jones from South Florida, Jaron Manning, who was a JUCO transfer. We've had a lot of turnover in the secondary room. Marion James, who was maybe our best cornerback last year, transferred to TCU. We had two safeties, Sean Asbury, no relation to me. Sean Asbury and Terry Jones transferred to Indiana. And we also had Taj Rael transfer to, I believe, Memphis. So we've had a lot of turnover. And a lot of people are expecting the secondary to be a weakness on our team. Having said that, I like the guys that we brought in. I think we reloaded pretty well in the secondary. I think Angelo Rankin from Richmond is going to be a pretty good cornerback. I think Rashid Reason has developed pretty nicely at corner. I think we're going to have competitions everywhere, but they didn't look bad in the spring game. They looked pretty good in the spring game and look up to par. Of course, fall camp, we'll have to see. Last year, the completion percentage was really high, actually. The quarterbacks were able to complete their passes against the secondary. But kind of like how we talked about sacks as they're a team stat, I feel like completion percentage for a defense is a team stat as well, because if the pass rush can't get to the quarterback, then the quarterback has all time to complete a pass. So it's not all on the secondary for having a high completion percentage. But there's also a lot of tacklers in the secondary we got to replace. Taj Rael, Terry Jones, Sean Asbury, those safeties were very good at coming up and defending the run and making tackles. And we got to replace that. We got to make sure the new guys understand the system and can come up and make tackles when they're asked to.
I'll throw in a couple more names David didn't mention. Ashton Whitner, he was a Georgia Southern transfer that played here last year. He's going to play some at the safety position. They're really high on Patrick Smith-Young from North Texas.
Mm-hmm.
He was a contributor at North Texas. Big pickup for us there. I expect him to contribute. David did mention Jerron Manning. I think his ceiling might be the highest in our secondary. I'm interested to see and watch him develop. But there's other guys that have kind of been lost in the shuffle that have transferred here as well, that have either been banged up and just haven't been able to contribute yet. Jeremy Mack from Colorado is one of them. And then Langston Williams?
Langston Williams from Colorado State. Yeah.
Both of them have dealt with some injury issues that have kind of delayed their ability to make an impact last season. They can come in and help now, adding into those other guys like Angelo Rankin and Will Jones. It's a talented group. It's just it'll be interesting to see how it all comes together. I am worried about replacing Terry Jones because, as David mentioned, he was fantastic as a tackler. He's a major reason we won that Georgia State game. His energy,
double safety blitz.
Yeah, he missed that first half, right, because he had that targeting suspension, and he comes in the second half and everything changes. He was just bringing good vibes to that defense, and I think replacing him is going to be a tough task. I think that we can do it, but that is going to decide how good this unit can be.
When I watched the spring game, the safeties was on defense was probably the position I was trying to pay the most attention to because, like you said, we had so much change, and at least to me in the spring game, there seemed like a lot of rotation. But like if I had to pick two guys I thought played the most in that game, and again, it's not even a game, it's a showcase. It looked like it was Mario Easterly and Ashton Whitner. But you guys, like you said, we bring in a lot of transfers as well. If you guys had to pick who you think those three starting safeties are, who do you think they are?
Well, I guess I'll take this one. If I had to pick, because it is open competition, fall camp is going to happen, and put these names in a bag and shuffle them. It's anyone's game. I am not counting anyone out to winning it. But if I had to pick, and you're making me pick, I'm going to say Ashton Whitmer, Patrick Smith-Young, and Will Jones.
I would sub Will for Jerron Manning.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you can't go wrong right now. They're gonna battle it out this summer camp, and this is probably and the offensive line are probably the biggest position battles we're gonna see this August.
And it's a good problem to have that we don't know.
Yeah,
because that means we have depth. And none of these guys are bad options. So it's going to be really interesting to see who rises above the rest. But you could see a guy that doesn't start the season and ends up being one of the best guys in the secondary because he came in and made a play.
All right. If you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who are you picking?
I mean, I mentioned him earlier, but Chris Trinidad, I think they're expecting him to make a major leap this season. And just talking to him about his offseason and his plans and his working out, it sounds like he's got that on his mind, and I'm expecting him to kind of break out.
I'm going to pick someone from the secondary and say Will Jones. And I think Will Jones is going to do his best to replace Terry Jones and get him just a lot of tackles and play well in the secondary.
If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.